Well, greetings, everybody. My name is Susan Eaton. My husband is Jim. We've been members of Colonial Church for 41 years, and we've been on many committees and boards, and we're still active in the church. And we love the church, and I also have a passion for quilting. And I'm here because I made this quilt, and I was asked to tell about the quilt today. It's called the Burning Bush quilt, and it's based on Exodus 3, where Moses was tending his flock on Mount Horeb, also called Mount Sinai, and in the distance he saw a fire. He walked over to the fire, and when he got close, there was an angel of the Lord in the fire. The angel told him not to come any closer because he was standing on holy ground and he should take off his sandals. And this was where God told Moses his plan of leading the Israelites out of Egypt and back into Israel. Moses said he couldn't do it because he wasn't adequate. He just didn't feel that he was confident enough. He just couldn't do it, but God told him he would help him. But Moses still doubted that he could do it. So God told him to throw down his staff, which he did, and it turned into a snake. And when he picked it up again, it turned back into a staff. And so then Moses did finally believe that he could lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. They had been slaves there for 400 years, and Moses would lead them to the Promised Land. Several years ago, a few friends and I used to make quilts for organizations where they could use as fundraisers for different events. And in 2014, we decided to make a quilt, a liturgical quilt, about Moses and the burning bush. So one person made the block with a silhouette of Moses in his sandals. Another person made a border for the quilt. All four of us made a lot of black and gray blocks for the sky, for smoke in the sky. And I made a green bush with flames coming out of it. And then when we got together again with all these blocks, they just didn't work. We just kept trying all different ways of laying them out, and they just weren't the same style of blocks, so we had to, we finally gave up the idea. We abandoned it, the project, and we could either take our blocks with us or we could give them away. I think we gave most of them away, but I did keep the little burning bush block that I had made. It was 36 inches square, and I really liked it. I knew that it would make a fun quilt sometime, but I just didn't have the plans for doing it. I didn't have the time for doing it right then. And so I put it in my closet in the quilt room, and it stayed there for several years. Every once in a while, I would take the block out of the closet, look at it, and put it away. I just got busy with other things. I called it my closet dweller. And then fast forward to March of 2020, when the pandemic caused most of us, or at least many of us, to shelter at home. I took the block out of the closet again and put it on the design wall in my quilt room. And I liked it so much. I just kept adding more and more blocks. It was green on the bottom, and it transitioned to gold and yellow and red and orange and blue and purple, all the colors that you see in a fire. And then up at the top, I put a blue sky for hope. So the quilt ended up being 62 inches by 70 inches, and it has about 2,000 pieces of fabric in it. It's called a string quilt, and string quilts were started in the 1800s, mostly because fabric was not as available back in the 1800s as it is now. And quilt makers saved every tiny little scrap and strip of fabric they had. They would sew those together to make blocks, and then sew the blocks together to make a quilt. But string quilts are still popular today just because they add a great design element. It's interesting to make them and to look at them, and they're really fun to make. when I make string quilts, I like to camouflage some little pictures in them. And so on this one, up at the top, there's a picture of an angel in the center to represent the angel of God who spoke to Moses. Over up here, I have some bare feet and some sandals. And then a little farther down, there's a snake, but it's a friendly snake. And my husband and I like to travel to different parts of the world. We like to go to different countries. And my favorite souvenir to buy is to buy fabric from another country. So over on that side, there's even a kangaroo that we got in Australia. And not that kangaroos belong in Egypt or Israel, but it's just, it was the perfect color. And I always like to add a little bit of whimsy to a quilt if I can. Sometimes when we travel, the adventure is even finding a quilt shop or a fabric shop. And my husband is really nice about this. He's happy to have me buy some fabric. And sometimes it's a real challenge. The adventure is finding the store. But when we were in Egypt, our son had been a student in Egypt, and we went over to visit him one time. And we went to the huge market that's in the middle of Cairo. It's called Khan el-Khalili. And I had heard that there was an area in this huge bazaar that has quilters. And they were called the tent makers of Cairo. Rather than the quilters of Cairo, they're called tent makers of Cairo. But it took us an hour wandering through this maze, and we finally found the stores and the stands where they had the quilts. The men in Egypt make quilts, not the women. And even out on the streets, we would see men with old-fashioned sewing machines, the pedal machines, sewing right among the crowds of the streets and the sidewalks of Cairo. It was really fun. There's also fabric from Zambia and India, Hungary, China, just a lot of different countries. When we were in Israel, we found out they don't make cotton fabric in Israel, but they get it from Syria. So the fabric that we bought in Israel is really from Syria. After I had all the blocks sewn together, I densely free motion quilted it, and I quilted it in the shape of flames, in going in all different directions, as when you would look at a fire, you would see flames going all over the place. I really enjoyed making the quilt. It was a great thing to do during the pandemic. I felt like I was doing something positive and something that really had meaning to it. I loved doing it. I did it all through the spring and summer. But at the end of May, when George Floyd was tragically murdered a few miles from our home, and fires broke out and riots broke out in Minneapolis, across the country, and around the world, it brought a deeper and different meaning to me in making this quilt, looking at the flames and the colors of the fire. Just as God got Moses' attention by the fire of the burning bush, the fires here and around the world got my attention, and it is showing a desperate need that we have for a better response to social, racial, and economic injustice around the world. And it's been like that for so many years. In many places of the Bible, it tells us that we need to pay attention. Proverbs 4:1 says, "Pay attention and gain understanding." Hebrews 2:1 says, "We must pay careful attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away." Thank you so much for allowing me to share my passion of quilting with you and to share my reflection of the special meaning of this quilt. And when the pandemic is over, and we're back at church again. When we see each other, please feel free to ask me any questions you want to about the quilt. And if you have any quilt stories, I'd like to hear your stories too. Every quilt has a story.